Hello, welcome to Monster Mondays. It is I, the Forsaken Scribe. So for this one, I just kind of did a quick Grammarly thing with everything. So, we'll see how that went for these ones. I decided to do a theme of kind of experiments and specifically psychological ones. So we've got today the, so I accidentally started a cult, the Russian sleep experiment, and last but not least, we have my roommate joined a cult on the deep web. So yeah, a pretty interesting variety here. So without further ado, let's get started. Just be warned though, there may be swearing, there may be topics of animal abuse or other things that may be triggering, so I hold no responsibility for any outrage you may feel on some of these stories. Without further ado, let's go. So I accidentally started a cult. I took an introductory psychology course last semester and I learned a lot about human social behavior. We even learned a bit of basic information about cults, which has been a lifelong interest for me. Mainly the kinds that seem to form around conspiracy theories. I guess it would be an oversimplification to say I wasn't aware of any of this stuff before, though. Over the past few years, I've seen acquaintances, friends, and even family fall for misinformation that could be pretty easily debunked with a quick Google search. I'm only 18. If I can parse fact from fiction, why is this such a thing these days? Even with what I've learned in class, I'm amazed at how this continues to play out in real life. Outside of academia and cold clinical laboratory environments, time and time again I'm stunned by how many rational, seemingly normal people accept blatant lies as fact. Not only do they accept it, but they spread it. Eventually I started to ask myself, how does this happen? Is it just that people are so bored with their own lives that they're compelled to seek entertaining explanations for what is clearly laid out in front of them? Then I asked myself how far it could go. What kinds of things will people believe with little to no actual proof? The explanations in my textbooks were not enough for me. I wanted to find out. Almost half a year ago, I started a social experiment. I joined a lesser-known discussion forum. I'm not going to name it here because I don't want anyone going over there after what happened and pulling up a page to submit a post. I put my fingers to the keys, eager to start my experiment. I ran to my first problem right there. In the first moment I stared at a blank text box, zeroing in on the cursor as it blinked almost mockingly. It sounds stupid, but I wasn't creative enough to come up with an idea to base my conspiracy theory on. There were a few things that I did know then, though. A few essential items I think I knew that people like a familiar villain to take a stand against. In a world full of a gray area, people like the black and white problems, the clear-cut evil. In addition, I knew people like to be in on a secret, to feel like they're somehow aware of a problem that is hidden in plain sight. People like problems that don't really have to do with anything, that they don't really have to do anything about a problem, that they don't need to solve with anything other than raising awareness. I'll admit, it took me several days of thinking before I figured out what to base my first post on. And when I finally landed on an idea, it didn't even come to me from my own creativity. I was watching a documentary, one about a rather infamous bloke. He was a murderer, both of man and animals, cats to be exact. The documentary seemed to focus mainly on the cats, all the awful things he did to those poor animals, and the great lengths to which complete strangers went to stop him from hurting any more of them. There was very little information about his human victims, which stunned me. I've since read he was an incredibly compassionate and intelligent person. He was living abroad and lonely, just looking for friends when he met his terrible end. On a personal note, I think of him, his family, and his friends daily. I feel a great shame for all that I've done that could continue to perpetuate their grief, and an ever-increasing horror for what may still be to come. While I struggled to understand this discrepancy in coverage, a thought hit me almost immediately. People fucking love cats. Even if you're not a cat person, you probably think anyone who hurts a cat should suffer tenfold themselves. It was precisely that black and white problem I was looking for. I was a little stoned, but I decided to give it a try. Right then, I popped open my laptop and started a post. Most of the world's stray cats vanished virtually overnight, yet the truth remains unknown by the masses. Elle tried to tell us the truth. We refused to listen. Police declined to investigate. The media refused to publish the fact. Massive scale cover-up to the highest levels of government / society. The truth is hard to look at, but you'll never unsee it once you open your eyes. I fell asleep again soon after publishing the post, but checked on the thread the first thing in the morning. I was expecting 1 or 2 responses at most, so I was absolutely floored by the number of replies present once I refreshed the page. 162 comments. Most of the users laughed me off as expected. Their comments are vastly outnumbered by those vehemently agreeing with me and pressing me for more information, almost desperately. People wanted to know how they could help save the cats. Even more surprisingly, users worked together to decode portions of my message. They worked quickly until they accurately identified the subject of the documentary that I'd seen just the other night. I'd barely given any information, but they figured it out. Honestly, I was amazed. I was proud. It was a strange feeling. Still, people wanted more. I gave them what they wanted. Cats were once recognized as gods. Now pussy means weak. This is purposeful. Innocent, helpless kittens rounded up to fulfill the sick and depraved needs of the world's mega-rich elites. To harness their inherent power. Look hard at the world around you. Ask yourself, where did the cats go? Snickering, I posted the comment, and I figured with the escalation of the absurdity and the information of my pure audacity in inputting a cat pun, it would be all over then. Part of me wanted it to be over, to finish as soon as it had started, but I'm ashamed to admit that a deeper, darker part of me wanted to ride this out for as long as possible. That part of me became increasingly impossible to ignore as the comments flooded in. 5x's1583. Thank you for this, HD. About time people woke up to the harsh truth. Let's see. 6x's212. Where did the cats go? 5x's29999. HD. You should make your own board. We need more information. We need to know the truth so we can help you put an end to this. 4x's and 5 3s says save the cats. 4x's 3 zeros and 2 1s says down with the elites, sick fucks. The third comment was stuck out most to me. I followed the advice and created my own board. I titled it WDTCG. I guess that stands for Where Did the Cats Go? Short for what seemed to be the first rallying cry associated with the faux conspiracy theory. Users flooded into the board, joining it at a rate that left my jaw on the floor. I was nearing 1,000 members by the end of the first day, all ears for whatever I would say next. I decided to wait before posting any new info. I needed time to think. I closed my laptop that night, feeling powerful. I had more people hanging on to my every word than I could have possibly imagined before all of this. All in once, it hit me, the realization that I needed to be careful with what I said. Any wrong move could cost me what I'd managed to build in such a short time. The next couple of months went by smoothly, with my interaction and reader base growing steadily. Some days, the number of followers would spark almost exponentially. They started calling themselves the Cat Crusaders, which I found oddly endearing. Frequently, they'd make connections that I hadn't even thought of beforehand. I'm embarrassed to admit that sometimes I'd even wonder if I'd accidentally stumbled upon the truth, if I knew more than I knew, if by some fantastical coincidence my fabricated conspiracy theory was actually true. They combed through pop culture and media, picking out instances that could align with WTDCG. A user had come to recognize as my most active loyal follower, 5x's2999, one who had suggested I start my own board in the first place, posted a particularly jarring thread about the song WAP, Wet Ass Pussy, popularly abbreviated as WAP, to downplay its horrific hidden meanings, is clearly about drowning cats. The elites and their spineless lackeys in the media are rubbing the truth in our faces, inoculating us with it in our everyday lives so that reality seems far-fetched. When will the people wake up? The Cat Crusaders quickly added anyone associated with the song to a list of elites they suspected as part of cat torture rings to a running list. Suspicion quickly turned to the undeniable fact in their little minds, and the list soon grew into hundreds. In the conversation, members termed these elites wolves, a known predator of cats. Some of the zanier members began to assert that the wolves were actual wolves, either humanoid or werewolf-type creatures, or wolves in human skin suits. A few even insisted they could tell the difference, that their human appearance was almost believable, but not enough to trick them. I regularly dropped new info posts, making sure to give the members time to work out any hidden meanings. They continued to make more and more connections, uncovering any acronyms or other word puzzles that I'd utilized. I didn't want to give everything away all at once, so they could decode either on their own or more often as a team. Working together seemed fun for them. It was fun for me too. It was like a game that we were all playing together. Things went from funny games to something much worse almost overnight. When the lockdown started, I saw a massive increase in numbers. People were bored at home and grasping for some understanding in such increasingly incomprehensible circumstances. Members began downplaying current events, claiming that the media was distorting reality. They used snappy one-liners as a point-blank denial of real problems that fostered real injustices. I watched sick to my stomach as comments like anti-mask, anti-vax, but pro-cats, and cat lives matter became the norm and even celebrated. After all, if the wolves had to take such tremendous measures, if they had to pull so many strings to stage such extreme scenes, it only meant they were on the right track, or that they were on the right way. Even more troubling soon were some extreme viewpoints that started popping up. It went from save the cats to death to all wolves, in a blink of an eye. There were a lot of wolves on the list by that time, and these severe, violent sentiments both deeply sickened me and stoked a sudden fear of what I'd created, what the Crusaders might become or do. However, these viewpoints only represented a small minority of users, so I figured the best thing to do was to abandon the experiment altogether, to stop adding fuel to the fire, as they say. I went dark for a month or so, ousting any lingering thoughts of WDTCG as soon as they came to mind. Considering how much time and thought I'd put into this experiment, forgetting about it was a struggle. I never honestly forgot about it, not even for a second. It overtook my thoughts entirely, even when I was away from the forum. Forgetting only became more difficult as time went on, and I started noticing some troubling signs. At first I thought I was just paranoid. I'd spent months practically forcing myself to adopt a hyper-paranoid mindset. After all, with each passing day, with each additional reminder, it all became impossible to ignore. WDTCG was starting to go mainstream. I spotted posts on normie social media sites that seemed entirely innocent at first glance, in which posts decrying high rates of animal abuse started to pop up in my feeds. This felt normal enough, of course. People are sympathetic to this cause. Right up until the hashtags, my stomach must have finally given into that fear ulcer I'd been brewing for months when I read it. WDTCG. Fuck. Ignorance was never bliss in the situation, but I knew then that it wasn't really a viable solution either. With fearful, shaking hands, I logged back into my account. Part of me expected that the rest of my followers would have gone dark with me, that the board would have withered and died without me to lead them. They would have understood that if I suddenly stopped posting new information, that the data must never have been accurate in the first place. That part of me was optimistic, that engaged in wishful thinking. That part of me was also greatly overshadowed by a more realistic version of me that knew what I'd done and what to expect when I logged back on. That part of me was right. In my absence, the board had absolutely exploded in overall member count and the amount of activity. The front page was cluttered with threads posted just in the last day or so. The top post had reached over 1,000 comments, and the rest were in the hundreds and counting. I skimmed through the first thread and the next one and the next one after that. I scrolled down and read more, if only to convince myself that what I was reading wasn't true, and that all this was fake, just a fun game for others like it was for me. Fear twisted my gut as I was forced to confront the truth. They all thought this was real. Isolated in a perfect echo chamber, members of my board had only further reinforced their outlandish beliefs. Any opinion that branched even slightly away from the dogma was quickly dogpiled, any measure of doubt or questioning regardless of the intention behind it. I believe these questions were raised by members who only wished to strengthen the claims of the larger group, who snuffed out in an instant. It was a metaphorical circle jerk in every possible way. And what was left after dissenting opinions were squashed was the worst version of the conspiracy theory. The most extremist and hateful version, The arrangement only represented a minority of users before I left. I scrolled through the users' fervent calls for justice and retribution, really a thinly veiled euphemism for violence, for vengeance. I thought, or rather I hoped, that if I stopped feeding them information, they would forget all about WDTCG. I hoped that if I stopped acting as their leader, they would cease to exist without my guidance. It was only then that I faced a sickening reality, one in which they didn't even need me to be there anymore at all. I knew I had to at least try to stop them, so I did the only thing I knew to do. I posted. Knowing I had to move quickly, I started a live chat thread. Comments quickly flooded in as users welcomed me back with open arms. They wanted to know what had happened to me. Had my mission been compromised? Had I been taken captive by the wolves? Did I have anything new to share with them? Because they said they were sure as hell. Because they sure as hell had a lot to share with me. I was welcomed warmly like a war hero returning back to his people. Right up until I finally did the right thing, the thing that anybody with respect for their fellow man would do. I told them the truth. His distraction said none of this is real. I made it all up. I waited a few moments, slowed by agonizing fear, before I hit enter to send the message. The next seconds were even more terrifying as I watched the ellipses appear at the bottom of the chat. Then the responses came one after another. 5X's 9302 said I call bullshit. 2X's 321 said there's no way you could have made this shit up, dude. Anyone with eyes can see what's happening. 5X's 92 said you'll be executed with the other wolves then on Judgment Day. Let's see. XXXXXXXXXXXX1 said, ha, funny joke, HD. Again, fuck. I started fact-checking my past info posts, meticulously disentangling their core beliefs that result from the misinformation I provided. I started small because I thought I'd get less pushback, but I was wrong again. When they refused to listen to reason even on the more superficial lies I'd spread, I tackled the most fundamental underlying info. My first post. If they saw fewer stray cats in their neighborhood, I explained it was likely due to catch, spay, and release programs, or better, animal shelters, perhaps a combination of both. I tried to explain that it was even more likely that nothing had changed at all. However, the perception of the outside world had been altered by reading my lies. They didn't like that one either. As a last-ditch effort, I typed in a sentiment that I tried to communicate from the start, perhaps fearing from the very beginning that all that I was seeing would occur. This distraction said, the movement is about peace and love. It's about saving innocent animals, not violence and destruction. It didn't take long before replies materialized, each confirmed my deepest fears. No, it's about justice. You're just a fake and a sellout. Death to all wolves. That was from XXX001. And then the next one was 6X's and 22, and then the last line was from 5X's 99. It went on like this for minutes, each reply more hateful and horrific than the last. Finally, a barrage of extremism was broken by a simple response from a user I immediately recognized. While I read his words, I could not feel anything other than terror. 5X's 2999. Hold on, sorry, HD is watching, communicating with me now. 5X's 2999. Yep, just as I suspected, account compromised. Await further instructions. That motherfucker. Fury eclipsed my fear at that moment. I put my fingers to the keyboard, fervently typing a counter response. Right as I hit send, I received an error message. I refreshed the page only to find my account had been logged out and I couldn't get back in. Eventually I managed to join the board again, but I could never get back into my old account. I don't post anymore. I just watch my little lie spread further, become more profound. I've reported the board several times. It's even been deleted twice. It always comes back, though, and they're picking up new ways to avoid the ban hammer. They removed the list of wolves. They learned to speak in coded language that sounds harmless, but is anything but. I've tried to communicate with law enforcement, but there's nothing they can do at this point. They're right, the Cat Crusaders haven't really done anything yet, but I fear what they will do in the future. And I'm starting to see even more troubling signs. It happened slowly at first, but it's only gotten worse. I've been searching for it now, so I may be biased, but the signs are unmistakable. 1 or 2 animal shelters recently reported being flooded with anonymous phone calls that have taken away their time and resources to address animal welfare. Cause demanded they concentrate their efforts on saving the cats from elites. and a few reports of higher instances of catnapping, even to the point of animal hoarding. Now there's the ever-escalating fury on the board, the calls for the blood of wolves. Someone else is posting from his destruction account now. I don't know who it is, but I have my suspicions. They release info posts that fit with the new extremist conspiracy theories that have become the majority view in my absence. Cat Crusaders lap it up eagerly and use it to fuel their hate. I was wrong about it from the beginning. I was terrible about them. The cultists aren't stupid or gullible. They're incredibly clever, quick, and most of all dedicated. These people are just dedicating themselves to a made-up issue because they were deliberately misled. It's all my fault. I've officially lost control of my experiment, and now I fear what I've created. And that was, I accidentally created a cult. Final thoughts? Wow, that's pretty realistic in terms of how it was well done. As some people may know right now, there's a popular political group known as QAnon that spreads all kinds of conspiracy nonsense that they fervently believe, and that other people, albeit a fringe amount, also believe, but maybe a vast majority of a certain side of things are pretending to believe, if only to appease their base nowadays. And that's kind of what the story reminded me of, in a way. Now, I'm not here to get political on this particular channel, but all I can say is conspiracy theories, cults, always fact check things before you start to believe them, because as you can see from this posting, it's all too easy for people to get so zealous about a cause that they believe in that things can go way out of hand, way even outside of the control of the person who was initially posting them. And also, don't post such things yourself if you can help it. And that's pretty much all I have to say about this particular thing. You'll see the sources in the description as traditional for me, so not a worry if you wanted to read it for yourself. And with that, we go to our next story, The Russian Sleep Experiment. July 8th, 2012, Conspiracies in Government, famous Creepypasta, a bunch of other tags, okay. Alright. And so, it starts, this particular one, as per some of the other ones I've done, is going to start out explaining what it's about and then go into the story. Widely regarded as one of the most popular and widest spread of creepypastas ever written, The Russian Sleep Experiment is notorious as much for its gruesome nature of its content as for its plausibility. To this day, a large portion of the articles written about the story attempts to investigate its validity or debunk it as a hoax, which speaks not only of the story's effectiveness, but also to the more profound social anxieties story appeals. For those who don't know, the Russian sleep experiment is supposedly a factual account of an experimentation acted out on subjects by the Soviet government and military in the wake of World War II. The experiment ostensibly meant to explore the effects of sleep deprivation on the human body. It was also used to test a new gas that could keep people awake for days. The report documents the degeneration of those experimented upon. Individuals commonly referred to within the creepypasta community as the test subjects. The horrifying results of these experiments and the crazed, almost subhuman or demonic creatures that it produces are often illustrated alongside the story, with one image in particular being representative of the entire myth. And now for the story. Russian sleep experiment creepypasta story. Russian researchers in the late 1940s kept 5 people awake for 15 days using an experimental gas-based stimulant. They were kept in a sealed environment to carefully monitor their oxygen intake so the gas didn't kill them, since it was toxic in high concentrations. This was before closed-circuit cameras, so they only had microphones and 5-inch thick glass porthole-sized windows into the chamber to monitor them. The room was stocked with books, cots to sleep on, no bedding, running water, and toilet, and enough dried food to last all 5 for over a month. The test subjects were political prisoners deemed enemies of the state during World War II. Everything was fine for the first 5 days. The subjects hardly complained, having been promised falsely that they would be freed if they submitted to the test and did not sleep for 30 days. Their conversations and activities were monitored. It was noted they continued to talk about increasingly traumatic incidents in their past. The general tone of their conversations took on a darker aspect after the 4-day mark. After 5 days, they complained about the circumstances and events that led them to where they were, and started to demonstrate severe paranoia. They stopped talking to each other and began alternatively whispering to the microphones in one-way mirrored portholes. Although they seemed to think they could win the trust of the experimenters by turning over their comrades, the other test subjects in captivity with them. At first, the researchers suspected this was an effect of the gas itself. After 9 days, the first of them started screaming. The experiments ran the length of the chamber, repeatedly yelling at the top of their lungs for 3 hours straight, despite continued attempts to call, but were only able to produce occasional squeaks. The researchers postulated that he had physically torn his vocal cords. The most surprising thing about this behavior is how the other captives reacted to it, or rather didn't react to it. They continued whispering into the microphone until the second of the captives started to scream. The 2 non-screaming prisoners took the books apart, smeared page after page with their own feces, and pasted them calmly over the glass portholes. The screaming promptly stopped. So did the whispering to the microphones. After 3 more days passed, the researchers checked on the microphones hourly to make sure they were working, since they thought it impossible that no sound could be coming with 5 people inside. Oxygen consumption in the chamber indicated all 5 must still be alive. In fact, it was the amount of oxygen 5 people would consume at a hefty level of strenuous exercise. On the morning of the 14th day, the researchers did something they said they would not to get a reaction from the captives. Researchers used the intercom inside the chamber, hoping to provoke any response from the prisoners afraid of death or vegetables. They announced, "We're opening the chamber to test the microphone. Step away from the door and lie flat on the floor, or you will be shot. Compliance will earn one of you your immediate freedom." To their surprise, they heard a single phrase in a calm voice respond, "We no longer want to be freed." A debate broke out among the researchers and military forces funding the research. Unable to provoke any more response using the intercom, it was finally decided to open the chamber at midnight on the 15th day. The chamber was flushed with the stimulant gas and filled with fresh air, and immediately voices from the microphones began to object. 3 different votes started begging, as if pleading for the life of loved ones, to turn the gas back on. The chamber was open. The soldiers were sent to receive the test subjects. They began to scream louder than ever, and so did the soldiers when they saw what was inside. 4 of the 5 test subjects were still alive, although no one could rightly call the state any of them in life. The food rations past 5 days had not been so much as touched. Past day 5 had not been so much as touched. There were chunks of meat from the dead test subject's thighs and the chest stuffed into the drain in the center of the chamber, blocking the drain and allowing 4 inches of water to accumulate on the floor. Precisely how much of the water on the floor was actually blood was never determined. All 4 surviving test subjects had large portions of muscle and skin torn away from their bodies. The destruction of flesh and exposed bones on their fingertips indicated the wounds were inflicted by hand, not with teeth as the researchers initially thought. Closer examination of the position and angles of the injuries revealed that most, if not all of them, were self-inflicted. The abdominal organs below the rib cages of all 4 test subjects had been removed, while the heart, lungs, and diaphragm remained in place. The skin and most of the muscles attached to the ribs had been ripped off, exposing the lungs to the rib cage. While the blood vessels and organs remained intact, they had just been taken out and laid on the floor, fanning out around the eviscerated but still living bodies of the subjects. The digestive tract of all 4 could be seen to be working, digesting food. It quickly became apparent they were digesting their own flesh that they'd ripped off and eaten for days. Most of the soldiers were Russian special operatives at the facility, but many refused to return to the chamber to remove the test subjects. They continued to scream to be left in the room and alternatively begged and demanded the gas be turned back on lest they fall asleep. To everyone's surprise, the test subjects put up a fierce fight in the process of being removed from the chamber. One of the Russian soldiers died from having his throat ripped out. Another was gravely injured by having his testicles ripped off and an artery in his leg severed by one of the subject's teeth. Another 5 of the soldiers lost their lives, if you count the ones that committed suicide in the weeks following the incident. One of the 4 living subjects had his spleen ruptured in the struggle, and and he bled out almost immediately. Medical researchers attempted to sedate him, but this proved impossible. He was injected with more than 10 times the human dose of morphine derivative, and still fought like a cornered animal, breaking the ribs and arm of one doctor. When their heart was seen to beat for a full 2 minutes after he bled up to the point, there was more air in his vascular system than blood. Even after it stopped, he continued to scream and flail for another 3 minutes, struggling to attack anyone and just repeating the word more over and over, weaker and weaker, until he finally fell silent. The surviving 3 test subjects were heavily restrained and moved to a medical facility, and 2 with intact vocal cords continued to beg for the gas, demanding to be kept awake. The most injured of the 3 was taken to the only surgical operating room the facility had. In preparing the subject to have his organs placed back within the body, the man was effectively immune to the sedative they had given him to prepare him for the surgery. He fought ferociously against his restraints when the anesthetic gas was brought out to put him under. He managed to tear most of his way through a 4-inch wide leather strap on his wrist, even though the weight of a 200-pound soldier was holding that wrist as well. It only took a bit more anesthetic than usual to put him under. In an instant, his eyelids fluttered and closed, his heart stopped. In the autopsy, the test subject had died on the operating table. It was found his blood had tripled the expected level of oxygen. His muscles that were still attached to his skeleton were badly torn, and he'd broken 9 bones in the struggle not to be subdued. Most of them were from the force his own muscles had exerted on him. And then, the second survivor had been the first of the group of 5 to start screaming. His vocal cords destroyed his inability to beg or object to surgery. He only reacted by shaking his head violently in disapproval when the anesthetic gas was brought near him. He shook his head yes when someone suggested reluctantly they tried the surgery without anesthetic, and did not react for the entire 6-hour procedure of replacing his abdominal organs and attempting to cover them with what remained of his skin. The surgeon presiding repeatedly stated that it should be medically possible for the patient to be still alive. One terrified nurse assisting the surgery said she had been in the patient's mouth to curl a smile several times whenever his eyes met hers. She'd seen the patient's mouth curl into a smile several times whenever his eyes met hers. When the surgery ended, the subject looked at the surgeon and began to wheeze loudly, attempting to talk while struggling. Assuming this must have been something of extreme importance, the soldier had a pen and pad fetched so the patient could write his message. It was simple. Keep cutting. The other 2 test subjects were given the same surgery, both without anesthetic as well, although they had to be injected with a paralytic for the duration of the operation. The surgeon found it impossible to perform the process while the patients laughed continuously. Once paralyzed, the subjects could only follow the attending researchers with their eyes. The paralytic cleared their system in an abnormally short time, and they were soon trying to escape their bonds. The moment they could speak, they were again asking for the stimulant gas. Researchers tried asking why they'd injured themselves, why they'd ripped out their own guts, and why they wanted to be given the gas again. Only one response was given: I must remain awake. All 3 subjects' restraints were reinforced, and they were packed back into the chamber, waiting determination as to what should be done with them. Researchers were facing the wrath of their military benefactors for having failed the stated goals of their project, considered euthanizing the surviving subjects. The commanding officer, a former KGB agent, instead saw potential and wanted to see what would happen if they were put back on the gas. The researchers strongly objected, but were overruled. In preparation for being sealed in the chamber again, the subjects were connected to an EEG monitor as they had their restraints padded for long-term confinement. To everyone's surprise, all 3 stopped struggling when it was let slip they were going back on the gas. All 3 were putting up a great struggle to stay awake at this point. One of the subjects that could speak was humming loudly and continuously. The mute subject was straining his legs against the leather bounds with all his might. First left, then right, then left for something to focus on. The remaining subject was holding his head off in his pillow, blinking rapidly. Having been the first to be wired for the EEG, most researchers were monitoring his brainwaves in response. They were normal for most of the time, but sometimes flatlined inexplicably. It looked as if he were repeatedly suffering from brain death before returning to normal. As they focused on paper scrolling out the brainwave monitor, only one nurse saw his eyes slip shut at the exact moment his head hit the pillow. His brainwaves immediately changed to deep sleep, then flatlined for the last time as his heart simultaneously stopped. The only remaining subject that could speak just started screaming to to be stilled in now. Subject's brainwaves showed the same flat lines as the one who died from falling asleep. Commander gave the order to close the chamber with both experiments inside and 3 researchers. One of the named 3 immediately drew his gun and shot the commander point blank between the eyes, then turned the gun on the mute subject and blew his brains out as well. He pointed the gun at the remaining subject, still restrained on a bed, as the remaining members of the medical and research team fled the room. "I won't be locked in here with these things, not with you," he screamed at the man strapped to the table. "What are you?" he demanded. "I must know." The subject smiled. "Have you forgotten so easily?" the subject asked. "We are you. We are the madness that lurks within you all, begging to be free at every moment with your deepest animal mind. We are what you hide from in your beds every night. We are what you sedate into silence and paralysis when you go through nocturnal haven where we cannot tread." The researcher paused and aimed at the subject's head and fired. The EEG flatlined as the subject weakly choked out, "So nearly free." The Russian sleep experiment. Appearance and origins. While many images are associated with the Russian sleep experiment, and the story is of an event rather than about an individual or character, one picture is most well-known and commonly linked to the account, and most fans will instantly recognize it. The image shows a humanoid creature staring blankly into the camera. The figure is horribly emaciated, and the fact is further emphasized by the extent of which the eyes are sunken back into the sockets, the brow and cheekbones protruding to an unnatural degree. Meanwhile, the teeth are enormous and forced forward by the thinness of the subject into a maniacal-looking grin. The subject's hugely exaggerated features, enlarged head, and huddled posture, first with the concept of them being a victim as a threat. The image is black and white, which leads to some authenticity considering the period in which it was alleged to be taken. Thankfully, the image is fake, and rather than being human, a photograph of a Halloween prop named Spasm was created in 2005 by Morbid Enterprises. There's some disagreement as to where the story first originated, where some sources claim the tale's first appearance could be linked back to the user known as Orange Soda, who posted the story to Creepypasta website on August 10th, 2010. Others trace back its origins to August 8th, 2009, post on RIP747 WordPress blog. The story was also posted on the Misc board of bodybuilding forums by a user named Falcon Punch on August 20th, 2009, which would again predate Orange Soda's post on the Creepypasta. It is also worth noting that the post on RIP747 blog claimed the story had been shared with him by his brother. While it may have just been a narrative device intended to distance the author from the piece, it could also be regarded as evidence that the story existed before the post. While some believe a British author, Ice, has written the original Creepypasta based on the fact she produced a book of the same name, she has clarified she was simply inspired by an earlier work and is not the originator of the myth. Following Orange Soda's post on Creepypasta, a page was set up for the story on August 16th, 2010. The story was then picked up and read aloud by Mr. Creepypasta channel on November of 2011, after being shared with Griffin23 and receiving favorable reactions on the r/WTF subreddit on October 2012. The story got a dedicated site, RussianSleepExperiment.com, on March 7th, 2013. The story was read aloud on YouTube over black and white images by I Read Creepypastas in a video uploaded October 1st, 2013. This may be the first time that the narrative was linked to photos so famously associated with it. In its first year alone, the video garnered over 11 million views. Influences and buried fears. Scholars of folklore have examined and written about the Russian sleep experiment myth have pointed out how the story's effectiveness and viral spread can be attributed not only to its apparent believability, more poignantly to latent anxieties within society around issues such as horrors of war and the atrocities committed during World War II, but also with apprehension about the capabilities of foreign militaries. It has been noted that across the spectrum of creepypasta stories, most stories concerning scientists and nefarious or experimentation are linked whether to Nazi Germany or Soviet Russia. Real-life influences. While many creepypasta stories have clear influences from older folkloric traditions, what makes the Russian sleep experiment story so unsettling or horrifically plausible is its proximity to the truth. While many words or articles which have been dedicated to debunking this myth. It is a simple fact that similar horrors have indeed been committed by the governments by their own people, and that these incidents were undoubtedly influential in the formation of this particular mythology. By suggesting that the events recounted took place in the late 1940s with the addition of black and white period photographs, the authors and posters place these fictional events within the same decade as the real-life atrocities of the Holocaust. While the sleep experiment narrative might seem far-fetched in most contexts, most readers question such research's ethical and moral validity. They remain within the realm of possibility when one considers that similar and perhaps more significant crimes against unwilling subjects were committed in the name of advancement during this period. Though exaggerated to the point of monstrosity, the Halloween prop spasm photograph skirts the line of being plausible when being reminded of pictures of the nearly starved victims of the death camps under the Nazi regime. Disconcertingly, the hollow cheeks, sunken eyes, and blank stares are nakedly reminiscent of actual footage and images from the time. Furthermore, when one considers the forced experimentation and medical research performed on the unwilling subjects, including the disabled by the Nazis, most infamously by Joseph Mengele, who, for example, saw fit to stitch pairs of living twins to one another, it becomes clear why readers have a hard time dismissing this story offhand. The Russian sleep experiment remains one of the most impactful and haunting creepypasta creations, not only because of the effectiveness of its fiction, but because it skirts a little too close to the horrifying truth. We still await the day that we get to see this classic creepypasta turned into a movie. Alright, and that was the Russian sleep experiment. Final thoughts? Well, as the article suggested, it's very much, skirts the line of believability. I mean, there were, in fact, in the time period that it supposedly took place, experiments that were done for all kinds of things, like, did Jewish people have, more than one heart or something like that? So, in that sense, it wouldn't be far-fetched to think that someone might do a sleep experiment of some kind, but whether it would manifest like this remains unknown. But perhaps the most believable factor is that after 15 days, all experiments had pretty much gotten completely mad in every possible way and started, being delusional, and in much the same way that someone who did a 15-day Awake-a-thon broadcast did some time ago. I don't remember exactly who it was, but I'm sure if you look it up, radio host does week-long, 2-week broadcast or something like that, you might find it. But yeah, all in all, a good story manages to capture that unsettling feeling we're going for on this show, and I wouldn't know how to improve upon something like that. And now for our last story of the night. My roommate joined a cult on the deep web, written by Christopher Maxim. I'm a student at Bridgewater State in Massachusetts. I share a dorm with my roommate, Wallace. We both major in computer science, and that's all we've ever talked about on the rare occasions that we actually speak to one another. We don't have much else in the way of common ground. You see, Wallace is an odd guy. He's very socially awkward and doesn't have many friends, if any at all. I've only ever seen him talking to his professors and one time the janitor. It's safe to say that Wallace is a recluse. Because of this, I don't know much about him. I'd love for the guy to open up more, but I'm not sure how to go about doing that. Okay, still going. Every so often I gotta check the camera because I never know if I'm reading and it's not rolling sometimes. Although usually I hear a doo-doo when it turns itself off because of lack of space. Alright. Because of this, I don't know much about him. I would love for the guy to open up more, but I'm not sure how to go about doing that. Besides, I have enough on my plate as it is between exams and the struggle of day-to-day finances. As cliche as it might sound, ramen is a popular meal on campus. Another one of Wallace's quirks is his obsessive-compulsive nature. He conducts himself in a particular manner and has his daily routine mapped out to a T. It never changes. When he wakes up, he brushes his teeth, making sure to gargle and spit precisely 3 times. He then puts on a striped shirt followed by khaki pants. His wardrobe never changes. He always arrives at class 5 minutes early and turns in his assignments a day before they're due. This is how it's always been. How do I know all this? Well, being a socially awkward hermit, Wallace didn't tell me these things. I don't think he's even aware that his routine is a byproduct of OCD. I'm not claiming to know precisely what causes Wallace's actions, but I do minor in psychology. It's just something I've picked up on during the 2 years I've lived with the guy. It's almost impossible not to notice. Knowing Wallace's usual behavioral patterns, I noticed that something wasn't right. He began sleeping in his clothes, not brushing his teeth, and not passing in his assignments on time. Eventually he stopped sleeping in our dorm altogether. After over a day of not seeing him, things started to look grim. Despite not knowing Wallace all that well, I became worried. Depression and suicide rates are at an all-time high for our age group. I didn't want the poor guy to go do something stupid. That worry justified me hacking into his laptop to see what he'd been up to. It was the only thing I could think to do. In finding his laptop and turning it on, I felt like a fool. The thing was clean as a whistle, at least to my eyes. You see, though I pride myself in the tech know-how, Wallace is far more adept in the field. It was safe to say I wouldn't find a shred of evidence as to where he might be or what he'd been doing. No journal entries, no browsing history, no nothing. Feeling anxious, I thought about any other potential ways to continue my hunt for the truth. That's when something clicked. Like I said before, I sometimes saw Wallace talking to a janitor in the halls. He was the only person I'd ever seen him speak to with at length. Perhaps he would know something about Wallace's state of affairs. Later that night, I exited the dorm and wandered the halls. Eventually, I found Chuck, the janitor. I tried to be gentle when confronting him as he had his back to mine and was known to be hard of hearing. Still, when I tapped him on the shoulder, he jumped. Holy cheeseballs, he nearly scared me half to death. Chuck laughed through his bushy gray mustache. What can I do for you, son? I told Chuck about my predicament and how I was concerned for Wallace, not having seen him in a while. Chuck's happy expression transformed to a look of unease and tension. He seemed to know a bit more than I did. Well, here's the thing. Wallace is a good kid. We do chat from time to time, and I happen to know where he might be. But I wouldn't feel comfortable blurting out the details of his social life to anyone who asked, even if you are his roommate. Social life? Wallace didn't have a social life. I pressured Chuck into laying me on the secret, related on thick, expressing a great deal of concern for Wallace's well-being. Being the friendly old janitor that Chuck is, he eventually gave in. Okay, I understand. Just please don't tell Wallace that I told you, okay? I nodded eagerly, waiting for him to reveal Wallace's whereabouts. Wallace has been feeling really down lately. He's got no one to talk to but me. The kid wanted some friends, people he could hang out with and talk to, you know? I listened closely for details I was so desperately sought after. So Wallace went on something he called, what was it, the Deep Web? On there he found a group of people. They called themselves the Clan of the Red Wolf or something like that. They invited him to one of their meetings. That's probably where he is right now. He seemed pretty excited when he told me about it. In fact, it's all he's been talking about the past week. There, that was it. That was the bit of info I needed, the key to finding Wallace. I thanked Chuck and gave him a goodnight wave as I ran back to my dorm room. From its sounds, Wallace got himself involved with another group of people who share his interests, and eventually invited him to hang out in real life. I had their quirky name, the Clan of the Red Wolf, and that was all I needed to find them on the deep web myself. Soon enough, I would be able to see my missing roommate. It took quite a while, but I finally managed to find the bottomless web forum about the so-called clan. It contained nothing but was a description and a series of videos. Here's the narrative as it appeared on the site. Welcome to your new belief system. We're the Clan of the Red Wolf, and we're here to help. There's 7 educational videos on this site, each tailored to a specific belief that we want to share with you. You're being asked to watch these programs to understand our doctrine. If you make it to the last one, you'll be invited into our den. Good luck. The summary was bizarre and nothing less than what I'd expected. Scrolling further, I noticed that all the videos were titled similarly. Day 1, Day 2, and so on. Eventually I watched them. The series reminded me of old war propaganda. It was made in the style of vintage cartoon, starring a wolf as the primary focus. It was not a normal wolf, but a cartoon caricature version of one picture, a character similar to Wile E. Coyote. In each video, the wolf learned a new clan value from the campy male narrator. Unlike old cartoons, the wolf comically goes against the narrator's wishes and suffers the consequences before learning his lesson. Every video ends with the narrator saying, "Join the pack. You never have to feel alone again." I guess that was the selling point for lonely Wallace. I'll share a bit of the transcript from each video along with any points of interest. Video on wildlife. Treat flora and fauna with dignity and respect. They're people too. Trees provide you with the air you breathe, and animals share the earth with you, keeping you from being alone. They deserve more than you ever will. Wolf relieves himself on the tree. The tree falls on top of him, crushing his head and revealing the blood and brain matter inside. Video 2, Thicker Than Blood. Your blood is the most important material in an earthly vessel. The clan requires a sample upon joining our order. This is a requirement for all pledges. Our blood must flow as one for us to work together and save the planet. Wolf enters a room full of cloaked figures, presumably clan members. All members are in line giving blood samples. Wolf refuses to have his blood drawn and walks away. Cloaked figure sneaks up on him and slices his throat with a dagger. The video focuses on the wolf bleeding out for a few minutes before fading to black. Video 3, Obey or Suffer. Remember what happened to our friend when he didn't give his blood to our cause? He didn't obey our order's rules, so he had to suffer the consequences. Remember, the clan's laws are important. You must obey or perish. Trust me, it's worth it. Shows the wolf bleeding out again, and now only a few cloaked figures are on top of him, stabbing his corpse repeatedly. Video 4, Vow of Secrecy. The clan of the Red Wolf is often misunderstood. Because of this, it is important never to tell anyone of our existence, under any circumstances. You may only speak about clan activity with other clan members. Break this rule and you will perish. Wolf is shown talking to his wolf pals and showing them this new cloak. Cloaked figure walks into the frame, what looks like a semi-automatic weapon, and opens fire. The wolves fall to the ground dead. Cloaked figure gives a thumbs up before the video ends. Video 5, Learn and Understand. If you're allowed into our inner sanctum, you'll be greeted with knowledge. We abide by the word of the Red Wolf, and you will abide by it too. You'll be expected to learn and understand his teachings, otherwise you will fail. Not only the clan, but the entire world. Wolf is seen in a classroom environment taking a test of some sort. Turns to cloak teacher and receives an F. Entire class points and laughs at him, and then pulls out much medieval weaponry from the robes, and then proceed to close in on the wolf. Swallows the lump in the throat before the video ends. Video 6, Tasks and Rituals. As a new recruit, you'll be asked to carry out various tasks ranging from the mundane to the fantastic. Most of these missions will involve ingredients for our rituals. As boring as that may sound, it's the most important thing you could ever do for the clan. Rituals are what give the clan power. Without this power, we cannot hope to rid the world of what plagues it. Wolf fails to bring ingredients to the clan members for the ritual. Jump cut to the wolf being sacrificed on the black altar atop a pentagram carved into the floor. He is beaten, cut open, and eventually torn apart by his fellow clansmen. Video 7, Mortals. When accepted as a full-fledged clan member, you are no longer considered human. You will be one of us. After that, you are discouraged from any and all human interaction unless it is deemed necessary to the cause. Humans are vile, filthy, disgusting, and dangerous creatures. We seek to exterminate them once and for all. Any human who knows of our existence and isn't deemed worthy enough to join must be killed. Nature is your only friend. Wolf is walking down the primary street-like environment and can be seen waving to everyone he sees. He comes upon a clan member who then pierces his gut with a long blade and tosses him aside in the road, where he is then run over by numerous cars. The content of the video was incredibly jarring. I almost couldn't believe that such a cult could actually exist, let alone that Wallace would join them. He must have been really lonely. The last video exited with the same join the pack spiel and then faded out to a screen with a series of numbers. I assumed it was my invitation to the den, perhaps an encrypted set of coordinates leading to the clan's lair. That I thought must have been where Wallace had gone. I wrote down the code and immediately started doing some research and began cracking it. Just as I was in the thick of things, something hit me. One of the videos said you couldn't talk to anyone about the clan under any circumstances, but Wallace spoke to Chuck and that didn't make any sense. Wallace was a stickler for rules. Another fact hit me. Video stated you could only talk about clan's activity with their clan members. What if Chuck was one of them? Chuck could be stationed at the college to recruit members, and he simply nudged Wallace in the right direction. He could have been playing dumb with me when I questioned him. So either Chuck was a clansman, or Wallace had broke a cardinal rule. Neither theory held much water. If Chuck was a member, why would he have told me anything without either recruiting or killing me? And if Wallace was so eager to be accepted into a strict cult, then why would he disobey their wishes? It couldn't make sense of either angle. Eventually, he gave in to the notion that perhaps Wallace simply disregarded the rules instead of his excitement. He was finally going to have friends, so he had to tell someone. That didn't entirely sit well with me, but I had to get back to cracking the code. I didn't have time to dwell on uncertainties. Just then, there was a knock on my dorm room door, followed by a voice. "It's Chuck the janitor. I'm here to tidy up your room." Chuck never cleaned dorm rooms. That wasn't part of his job. "I'm all set," I yelled, hoping he would leave me be. The knocking ceased. There was a long stretch of silence, followed by a soft metallic creak. The doorknob was turning. And that was, a friend joined a cult on the deep web. Final thoughts? Wow, that suspenseful ending. Sounds like this guy's gonna either join the cult or die, based on the fact that, he had heard something he shouldn't have, theoretically. That janitor, being fairly slow, probably didn't realize that fact until after he'd gone back to his dorm room. So that definitely adds some layer of believability that he would have been able to investigate this before he finally would meet his end. That being said, yeah, one needs to be careful about so-called religions that claim to have the truth or the best way or the way to divinity, because, well, some may be harmless religions, others may be completely violent cults that, will do anything to keep their existence a secret from anyone who's not them. So, that's where one has to be a little bit careful about these things. And sometimes even people who do keep the secret and are members might end up reaching a violent end, as was the case of an infamous one. I can't remember the exact name of it, but basically they drank the Kool-Aid, so to speak, and died to ascend to a greater plane of existence. That being said, this has been Monster Mondays, and hopefully you enjoyed Cult Week, as it were. This has been the Forsaken Scribe, and remember, Mom's not here, kids. Bye-bye.